Greetings, Rob McCrae here, erstwhile known as Clan McCrae 9. And in this video, we're going to continue our look at the power forms and the mobilization forms in IMPERIVM ROMANVM 2, version 2.0 for Vassal module. So in the previous video, we set up the power forms per the scenario instructions and the mobilization form. I did want to do one quick correction here, or addition to something I left out. So this scenario is a period 2 scenario, and click here and just put in the scenario name. These are just informational. They don't really affect any of the calculations that are going to go on down here, but it's just a nice little reminder in case you're looking up information during the game for the scenario. So going back to the power form, just a reminder, we set up the provinces that belong to Octavian that he controls. We set up the minor powers for Octavian's Gallic allies. We set the treasury level per the scenario instructions and the morale level as well, and the overall information for who Octavian is and what type of faction he is. So before we get started, I wanted to do a little bit of setup here on the map. Let me get the pieces tree minimized there. So I'm going to zoom in on this area of the map, and this isn't really necessary for what we're going to be doing instruction wise, but just to show you how it's associated. So this scenario begins in 38 BC January. So I'm going to right click here right on the 0, and I'm going to change this to 38. I'm going to change the BC AD to BC. So now we're at 38 BC. And we're going to also advance the phase. So this is a, let's see how many players they are in this scenario. This is either a 5-player, a 3-player, or a 4-player. So I'm going to say that we're playing it as a 3-player. Well, actually, what I need to do is I need to see how many major powers there are. So let's see, there's Sextus Pompeius, Octavian, Anthony, and Lepidus. So there are 4 major powers. So I almost led you astray there, but I caught myself. So you want to look in the scenario rules as how many major powers are listed in the scenario rules. For this scenario, there are 4 major powers. So you would select 4 major powers there, and that's going to bring up your phase turn counter. And you don't have to use the turn counter to enjoy the module. I would recommend using it. It's going to basically keep you straight as to which phase you're currently on. My one warning about it is these counters, these turn counters, suck up a lot of processor memory speed. I know I'm talking babble there. It takes up a lot of your processor power is probably the best way to explain it. And so if you click the plus button too quickly, too many times, it's going to lock up your game. That's going to be really frustrating if you've just played an entire 15, 20, 30 minutes and you've got all kinds of movement and then the game locks up before you save it. So I just want to kind of throw that warning out there. If you're going to use the counters, which I do recommend, either click very slowly here. See how long it takes it to update. I clicked and now it just now changed. So it takes about 5 seconds for that to update. And it's going to overload your processor if you click it too many times too quickly. The better way to do big movements in this is to right click on the turn there and then do set turn. So what I want to do is I want to advance us far enough to the month of March, because that's going to be our first mobilization phase for this scenario. And we'll go ahead and set this up to taxation mobilization phase, and I hit save. And before I do, I want you to keep your eyes over here on the turn counters, and you're going to see that the turn counter, the months are going to stay the same because I actually got a correction there. The month is going to change to March, and the phase is going to change to taxation and mobilization. And wait for it. And there we go. You see the phase did move to taxation and mobilization, and the month did change to March. So now, if we were in the scenario, we would have finished the first 2 turns for January and February, bringing us back to, or up to, the month of March, the very first phase, which is taxation and mobilization. And then we would open up our power form if we were Octavian. And the first thing that we would do is we would move our total tax value to the treasury level. So 55, which is our tax value, plus our current treasury level of 9 is going to be 64. So I'm going to go ahead and adjust that. Okay. No decimal point values at this point for the treasury level. And as we saw in the last video, that's going to affect the mobilization chart, which now shows a treasury level of 64, which we anticipated. So here's where you have to be somewhat organized about how you do this. So we've assigned the new treasury level. Just be aware that every time you change this, let me bring them up here so you can see both of them. Every time we change this value, it adjusts the treasury level. So you're going to adjust your treasury level with your total tax value first, and then you can close your power form. You're done with that for a while. Next, we're going to make some purchases. So the main reason that I wanted to create this set of videos is because I created this updated mobilization form to fit the power of the Vassal module. But in doing so, some of the limitations of Vassal make it where the final product here is pretty powerful, but it's also an extremely busy board to look at. All these zeros and ones and twos and fours. So the main thing that I wanted to get across to you is you can simplify it a little bit by putting dashes here, which will visually make the mobilization form a little bit more easy to comprehend right off the bat. I think over time players will get used to the form and it won't be such a difficulty to them. But starting off, I certainly understand looking at it, it could be a bit of an eyesore. And you can, even if you want to remove the CER values, you can always come back. If you pick up new mobilization areas in the game, you can always come back, and I'll show you in a second when I get these in here how to put a value in there, even though it looks like I'm deleting. I'm not actually deleting, I'm just setting the value to blank right now. So if I needed to come back later and change this, then I would click on that dash, change value, and there are my province lists. So I'd be able to do that. Same thing here. The counter is still there. You just find it. Just, you if you can't find it at first, you're going to click around, but it's usually going to be somewhere around the middle of the cell, and then change value, and then you would go in and add your CER value. So visually now, I think it's a little bit easier to understand that everything below Italia can be ignored. It has nothing to do with this section down here. We'll deal with that section here in a little bit. But what I wanted to do was set it up so that visually you can learn to ignore any of these numerous zeros that are not associated with the mobilization area. So now we wanted to make some purchases. So Octavian, and of course there's not going to be any strategy or tactics involved in my decisions here. I just want to show you how the counters work. So keep an eye up here while you kind of multitask with your eyeballs. So let's say in Gallia and Germania, Octavian wants to purchase a 2010 and 2 412 units. Okay, so since this is the month of March, we're going to ignore the December, September, January column. So this column right here in each cell, the DSJ, DSJ, and just bear in mind that it should have actually been, I think, June, September, December. I think I typed the letters backwards. It doesn't really matter. Just it's more of a visual thing. It doesn't affect anything. It's just that in the rule books, I think you'll usually see June, September, December, or however it's listed in the books is different than the December, September, June order that I decided to type it in. So like I say, it doesn't matter. Just to be aware that it represents the same months. So we are going to ignore December, September, and June right now because this is the month of March mobilization phase. I am going to come back and we'll do some explanation. I'll show you how the December, September, and June column would work if this were that mobilization period or mobilization phase. So I forget my numbers exactly, but I think I said 1/20/10 we want to purchase. And if you'll notice as I do that, the remaining column switch to 0, so that's the maximum number of 2010s that I can purchase in Gallia and Germania anyway. So it's letting me know that I've reached my maximum. Obviously, if I went up to 2, it would say, no, I'm not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to go into negative numbers there. So I'm going to bring that back down to 1, so we're still legal. But then the other thing, I said to keep your eyeballs on up here, with the cost of 7 per unit, we would expect this to go down to 50. Or correction, from 64 to 57. So let's go back to our original amount of 64, and then I purchase at 7, which takes us down to a treasury level of 57. Same thing here, Gallia and Germania. We're going to purchase 2 412 units at 2 apiece, so 2 times 2 is 4, so we would expect the treasury level to go down to 53, and it does. And so let's leave Gallia and Germania for now and look at Hispania. And we want to purchase a 1610, again using the March counter, at 6, and it did the proper subtraction. And again 2 more 412s, this time for Hispania at 2 apiece. And so we're still legal. We don't see any numbers in the remaining column that go negative. So again, to kind of capture that thought, this is how many you're allowed to purchase for Gallia and Germania. of 2010s, and this is how many you have remaining after your purchases. So at the start of the scenario, or the start of the mobilization and taxation mobilization phase, you should have 2 allowed and 2 remaining, and then it will subtract whatever you purchase. So coming down to Cisalpina, let's go right on over here and let's look at 1830. So we've got 43 left on our treasury level. So we're going to purchase 1 ship. So it subtracted 18 from our level. So now we're down to 25. So we're still doing good. I'm going to purchase 1 2010, 1 412, and then for Italia, I'm going to purchase 2 2010s. No, I take that back. They're kind of pricey, so I'm going to purchase a couple of 412s. And I also want to buy a baggage train. So baggage costs 8. So I assigned a 1 there. So I have a treasury level of 4. So what Octavian is going to do is hold right there. And the reason why, he could go down, he could spend the extra 2. There's really no reason to save money. You don't win the game by having treasury level values. So what you would hold on to your treasury level for after the mobilization phase is later during the land movement phase you can purchase some fort levels. So with a cost of 2 per level, later on in the turn I would be able to purchase 2 fort levels. So Octavian's going to hold on to his treasury level of 4 just for that purpose. And then the only other thing to do would be the allotment of 1 412 unit for Illyricum. That would be designated there, and by showing the province. So I think we're good to go, and you can see here exactly how the treasury form or the treasury level on the mobilization form works. Now, so here's where you have to time this thing out correctly in order to make the math be stabilized, so that you're not setting numbers, changing them, and then forgetting everything that you did. So at this point, you would make your purchases. So everything that you purchased here, you would go to the counter manifest, and this is my gimmicky little cheesy thing that I did here. If you own the board game, you know that they've got those plastic trays in there. So I went ahead and gave you a little slightly transparent plastic tray lid, so it shouldn't get stuck as far as how to get this thing off. So it says select Control L to remove pieces tray lid, and so selecting Control L, I've taken the lid off, and now I can see my pieces. Just to let you know, even if you didn't figure that out, the pieces can still be moved, but harder to see, obviously. So I would take those pieces from the counter manifest, and there's a few things you can do. You could place them directly on the board. You could remove them. Let's see, so Octavian is purple. So for instance, 1 2010, 2 2010s were purchased. So you would pull, notice the number here, the counter. So as I pull the pieces from the pieces tray, you're going to see that number went down to 8 and now to 7. So the counter manifest tray is going to always track the number of remaining pieces that you have and limit the pieces to the physical board game limitations. The one exception to that is fortresses. The fortifications, there is a natural physical limit with the board game. I'm not sure what that natural physical limitation number is, and therefore it's not programmed into the Vassal module. So if you're playing, I would recommend just trying to come up with some system. I don't really have a good answer, to be honest. Just trying to come up with some system to figure out what the total point value for the fortifications are and keep your own board level within that. I'm going to try and figure that all out and add it as a future modification to the Vassal module. That'll take a few of my brain cells to figure it out. It shouldn't be too difficult, but the way that the pieces are, with some of them having a value of 5, some a value of 3, and value of 1, it kind of makes it a little iffy in terms of how that translates into the Vassal module, being able to track the total point values, fort level values that are available in the game. So you would pull your pieces from the counter manifest tray, and then you would place them onto the map as part of the mobilization phase. And that's pretty much that for taxation and mobilization. I do want to go back and show you a couple of other things though. So in terms of how you manage the timing of this so that you don't lose your information. So this brings the treasury level down to 4. So once you've pulled all of your pieces off and you've made, all of your purchases, then you can clear the mobilization form. There's a zeroize button up here. But before you do that, you're going to want to transfer your treasury level back here. So now your treasury level is going to become 4. Now notice that it's going to temporarily make this number out of whack. That's fine, because you're about to fix that problem anyway. It's not really a problem. That's just be aware that you have to do it in order. If you want to use paper and pen to make sure that you have your remaining treasury level after your purchases, it's not a bad idea. So I added this little tool in here, this little zeroize button. So these purchases that you made, it would be very easy to miss one if you had to go back individually and clear them off. So you can just hit the zeroize button and you'll see that it zeroized all the purchases, and now the treasury level does match your new treasury level on your power form. So one of the other things that I wanted to show you, so just breaking our complete scenario that we just did, I'm going to artificially change the treasury level. Let's say later on in the game Octavian had 45. I'm also going to kind of jump logic here and say, let's say this was a period 4 scenario. So again, I've completely jumped out of where we were on our previous scenario. We're into the full imagination mode now. So period 4, you can see that militia costs 1/2. So I'm going to ignore all this other information. I'm just going to leave what we have up here. But what I'm wanting to show you is how the militia button works. So would have actually, for the previous scenario, brought that down to not use, but we're going to leave the militia on for right now. And I'm going to set per period 4 instructions, I'm going to set the cost to 1/2 or 0.5. So you can see here that if I made a militia purchase, it's going to subtract 0.5 from the total. Okay, pretty easy concept. Just wanted to let you see how that works. Now, the other thing that I wanted to discuss is December, September, and June purchases. So during turn 1, it doesn't matter what month you're in. Turn 1 is a freebie. So during turn 1, you're always going to use March, no matter what month it is. Let me say it again. During turn 1, you're going to always use March, even if it's December or September or June, because for the first year, all purchases are a multiplier of 1 times the cost. All subsequent turns after that, turns 2 through whatever, there's a penalty for purchasing units during December, September, and June of 2. So that multiplier is built in. So for instance, if we purchased a 2010 during the month of December, anytime after turn 1, just going to kind of predict the math here. So 2 times 7, our penalty of 2 times 7 is 14. So if my math is right, this is going to go down to 31. So 45 minus 14. Okay, good. The math was correct. That's not always the case. So you can see there the purpose of these 2 columns. You're never going to use both columns within one taxation mobilization phase. It's never going to happen. You're either going to use December, September, and June for any taxation mobilization period after turn 1 for those months. And you're going to use March for any months during turn 1 and obviously during turn 2 and following in the month of March, you're going to use the March column. So I believe we've covered everything here as far as taxation mobilization form. The main things I want to kind of hit on as far as memory joggers that are going to be important is follow the timing of how you progress from the power form to the mobilization form, make your purchases, record your treasury level back to the power form, and once you have it recorded here, then zeroize, and that gets you all set up back to 0 for the next taxation mobilization phase. I did want to show you one other thing. I've included a flow chart here. You can also use the flow chart if you wanted to record your progress through the game. If you're familiar with flow charts, you're just going to go from block to block to block. The green area is the taxation mobilization phase. So I wanted to break that out a little bit further because it's the most complex part of the game. And if you need to zoom in so you can read it a little bit better, you can do that as well. So as long as you follow the progress of the flow chart, for instance, it's going to tell you to advance the phase, counter, taxation, mobilization. So these instructions are not only instructions for progress of Imperium Romanum 2, but they're also instructions for progress for Imperium Romanum 2 as far as how you use it in the Vassal module. So select Zeroize button on mobilization form, manually add your major power tax base to its power form treasury level. It's going to ask you if it's turn 1. If it's yes, then you're going to always use the March. And as I said, if it's not turn 1, then you have to decide if it's the month of March. If yes, you're going to use the March counter. If no, you're going to use the December, September, and June counter. You're going to left click and add your purchases. You're going to finalize your purchase request, transfer the treasury level back to your power form. You're going to make your purchases, move the counters to the map, And then finally, once you're confident that all the purchases are completed and the treasure level has been transferred back to the power form correctly, you're going to zeroize to return your purchase counter back to 0. Obviously, I put that zeroize step in here twice because it's important. There it is. It's important to remember that you have that function. It's also remember to know when to use the zeroize and when not to use it. So that's all we have for this video. Until next time, thank you very much.